In recent days, the film world and millions of admirers are still reeling from the loss of Robert Redford, the Hollywood giant who, at 89, closed an extraordinary life and career. What happened to Robert Redford is not just another sad page. It feels like an earthquake, a sharp cut straight through the heart, leaving so many breathless with grief. And now, as his body is readied for a private farewell in the Utah mountains, no red carpet, no lenses, only family and quiet remembrance, the world watches from a respectful distance. Hollywood mourns, tributes pour in, and among the voices, one rises above the rest. Meryl Streep, co-star, confidant, and companion in artistry for 40 years, whose farewell was so piercing, so full of sorrow, it left listeners in tears. Before we walk this path, consider this a simple gesture of respect, a moment of gratitude for a man who gave the world so much and whom time has now cruelly taken. As the world mourns Robert Redford, it's worth remembering that his story didn't begin in triumph, but in trial. As a boy, he lay in a narrow bed, his body stilled by polio, his spirit forced into the shadows. No audience could see the way that darkness pressed down, as if fate itself were measuring how much pain a future legend could carry. Born on August 18, 1936, in Santa Monica to Charles and Martha, raised an only child in Venice, with the weight of the Depression still lingering, he learned early how fragile life can be. He would later say of those years, "I thought I might never walk again. But my mother refused to let me give up." Night after night, Martha massaged his rigid legs and whispered courage into the quiet, teaching him that resilience is not a victory shout, it's the calm refusal to surrender. By the late 1940s and early 1950s, the boy who would command the screen first had to master fear. Restless and angry, he drifted near a rough Los Angeles crowd, slipping into reckless nights that held more danger than he understood. Years later, he admitted, "I was always searching for something I couldn't name." One night, the police stopped him for mischief. It ended with a warning, but the lesson stayed. His father's stern hand pulled him back from an edge that might have ended everything too soon. He steadied himself with sketchbooks and the open sky with sport and discipline. At the Los Angeles Tennis Club, he even warmed up the great Pancho Gonzalez, a small, bright sign he might belong somewhere beyond the forgotten corners of his restless city. Then came 1955. And a blow that would overshadow every triumph that followed. His mother, the same woman who had coaxed life back into his paralyzed legs, went in for surgery and never returned. A post-operative infection dimmed the light of his world. For the son she left behind, the loss was absolute. His father never remarried. The house fell quiet, every room echoing with her absence. Redford later said, "It left me with a silence I could never fill." That silence followed him into adulthood, into fame, into victories that should have tasted like joy, but carried the ache of a wound no success could heal. The mid-1950s gave him extremes that cut both ways. A sports scholarship at the University of Colorado lifted him for a moment, but heavy drinking soon stripped it away. Leaving early felt like a stone tied to his spirit, as if a door had slammed before he'd learned how to open it. At the edge of despair, he chose distance over defeat. In his early 20s, he wandered France, Spain, and Italy, living on scraps, sketching, and painting, walking long, solitary miles under foreign skies until the noise inside him softened. Looking back, he said, "Resilience is rarely loud. It is moving forward anyway, when fear has every argument in its favor." When he returned to New York in his mid-20s, he carried scars and tools, a stubborn belief in art, a discipline forged on courts and trails, and a vow that when darkness returned, he would answer it with work. To the world, Robert Redford's arrival in New York in the late 1950s looked like ambition. Beneath the neon, it was survival. At 22, still raw from his mother's death and the shame of a lost scholarship, he walked those wet streets with all the weight of that history. At Pratt, he gripped brushes as if painting might save him. Then he dared the stage at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. Acting brought no miracle, only a steep climb. By 24, he scraped by with small TV parts, The Twilight Zone, maverick, Perry Mason, just enough to keep the lights on. Later he said it wasn't glamorous. It was survival, plain and simple. Survival carried irony. The face that would one day captivate the world was his early curse. He was dismissed as too pretty, a gilded cage he later described bitterly. You're inside, but no one thinks you belong. He fought to be seen not as a mask, but as a man. Then came 1963, and Freedom on Broadway, Neil Simon's Barefoot in the Park. At 27, he finally revealed the wit, timing, and quiet vulnerability critics couldn't ignore. Each curtain call felt like vindication. For the first time they saw me, not just what I looked like, he reflected. From that stage, Hollywood called. Small parts gave way to leads, and soon the young man so easily dismissed was carving his place in cinema's memory. The sting of those early rejections never left him. It became the hidden fire behind every choice. The reason he took control as a director, the seed that would become Sundance. From dim television sets to Broadway's bright heat, Redford proved he wasn't a hollow idol, he was an artist who clawed for every inch. What began as survival became the spark of a meteoric rise. What the world remembers as legend was forged first in shadows, silence, and pain. His run to the top in the late 1960s and 1970s shone like gold. He looked untouchable, the Sundance Kid in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the sly Johnny Hooker in The Sting, the relentless Bob Woodward in All the President's Men, the aching romantic in The Way We Were. Those roles alone could have secured immortality, yet every ovation brought its own chains, beauty and expectation tightening around him. He confessed that the face adored by millions was not purely a blessing, but a burden. Even at his peak, he felt the suspicion. Was he more than golden hair and symmetry? It was a gilded cage, he said. You're inside, but no one thinks you belong. Even triumph demanded proof. He had to fight again and again to be seen as more than a handsome image. When the great Gatsby stumbled despite his star power, the wound cut deeper than reviews could measure. To the public, it was a misstep. To him, it was a verdict. A golden boy was not allowed to falter. He refused to retreat. He chose harder roads. In All the President's Men, he insisted that film could serve urgency, not just escape. That entertainment could make room for truth. The cost was real. Some called him self-serious. Audiences drifted. He didn't bend. Cinema has a duty to mirror reality, however uncomfortable, he said, and carried that conviction like a soldier with unseen scars. Then came his greatest test, stepping behind the camera for ordinary people. In Hollywood, whispers said a handsome leading man couldn't possibly command vision. Each day felt like a tightrope, eyes waiting for a fall. What emerged was Triumph, a piercing, humane story of grief that broke the silence and won him the Academy Award for Best Director. For Redford, that Oscar wasn't just recognition. It was release, proof he was more than an idol, he was a storyteller of depth. Still, he wanted more. In 1981, he planted Sundance, a fragile dream many mocked, starved for funding, propped up by faith and sacrifice. Some nights collapse felt inevitable. He carried it forward anyway, not for himself, but for the unheard, the stage he had once needed. He gave up quiet, gave up ease, shouldered the solitude that comes with building something that lasts, so others could step into the light. His golden age was never just shine. It was brilliance edged by pain, the trap of beauty, the weight of expectation, the exhaustion of proving himself, the loneliness of nurturing a dream into a sanctuary. The world saw triumph. He lived struggle. And from that struggle came his legend, not a man basking in stardom, but one who turned scars into legacy. In mourning, a truth rings clear. The world remembers the star, but what endures is the artist who showed that even at the summit, the climb draws blood, and that greatness is born not from ease, but from fire. It is heartbreaking to accept that even legends cannot outrun time. On September 16, 2025, when the news spread that Robert Redford had died at 89, the world staggered. There were no warnings, no vigils, no whispered goodbyes. Only days earlier, he spoke of Sundance, of unfinished scripts, of stories he still meant to bring to life. One moment, he felt immortal, unyielding, eternal. The next, there was silence, For millions, the grief was immediate. For Meryl Streep, it was a blade to the heart. "I think I'm still in denial," she whispered, her voice breaking in the hours after. In a makeup chair, she overheard the words that shattered her world. "Robert Redford is gone." To strangers, it was a headline. To her, it was the collapse of 40 years of trust and companionship, of a friendship that steadied her through storms. "It feels," she wept, "like the air has gone out of the room." Their story began in 1985, beneath the vast skies of Out of Africa. On screen, they gave us one of cinema's great romances, her Baroness, his hunter, two souls bound by tenderness against an endless horizon. Off-screen, something rarer grew, not scandal, not fleeting heat, but trust. In the silences between takes, in the way he looked without judgment, in how he listened, Meryl found an ally who neither demanded nor diminished. "Robert always made me feel seen," she said. "In this industry, that's a miracle."